for our elders. It was born as a result of tragedy. The real motivation for me in all of this came as a result of my parents. In 2008, they were moved into a great facility, bricks and mortar. The staff looked good. Everybody knew my mother's name. They knew she needed decaffeinated coffee at night and caffeinated in the morning, and they knew which side to put her fork on, and which was unusual for her. And so they knew my mother. And then the turnover started, and all of a sudden, there were people on various shifts that did not know my mother. My dad went to put my mother's slippers up one night. After dancing with her, they danced every night. My dad was 93, took fewer medications than I do. Was always looking forward to spending his 100th birthday listening to Willard Scott announce his name on the NBC Today show. 93, he danced with my mother that night, went to put her slippers up, opened the closet doors that had been a constant problem while we were there. They stuck again and then pulled off the frame and crushed him. It turned out that they were 100-pound doors. My dad weighed about 117. They crushed him. He died 24 days later. My mother did not understand why he died. I still have a hard time. I still blame myself for putting him in that room. It's part of the things I learned from my dad's situation entered directly into those interview forms that we use. There are questions that are born of tragedy. And sometimes that's the best way that things happen in this country, unfortunately. Then my mother, and as I alluded to this earlier, my mother, she really became depressed. I mean, my dad and my mother have been married 68 years. They danced every night. My mother had had a couple of strokes, minor strokes, but she was somewhat debilitated, but my dad always made up for that. He was her ambulation. As long as he was alive, they did not need anybody to transfer my mother. Didn't need anybody to walk her to the dining room or the exercise. They did all of that together. And all of a sudden, she was, for the first time in 68 years, without my dad after his death. She became very angry. She was angry at certain staff members, certain caregivers, and particularly the administrator in that building. She felt they had killed her husband. As the dutiful son, I was assigned, let's get to the bottom of this. And it took a lot of time. It took a long time. It took a lot of money. Most of all, it took a lot of tears, and it took a lot out of me. So for 9 months, my mother lived in that facility. I could not get my mother to leave. That was her home. She felt that she had been attacked, and she was not going to give up. So what I did over time is I hired caregivers. As I watched the care go down, they were not answering my mother's call lights. There were times when I'd be 30 minutes, 40 minutes in the room. They would not answer my mother's call light. I would ring all 4 of the call lights in her 2-bedroom apartment, and they would not come. I reported that to the state. The state came in and basically found that nobody else had problems, and therefore we didn't have problems. It's why one of my pieces of advice on my website is do not rely upon state regulators. Some of them are good people, honestly, some of them are not. All of them are overworked and underpaid, and they simply don't have the time to do what you and I, as consumers of long-term care, have to do. Well, long story short is in the 8th month, my mother, we believe, rang her call light. The facility always denied that she rang her call light, but interestingly enough, the state didn't even ask the facility for its records. It had computer records of whether my mother or anyone else rang a call light. But the state would come in and investigate as to whether call lights were being timely answered. They never even asked for the computer records that would have indicated that night. We believe she rang it. They believed that she did not, but you know what? Those records were destroyed. We didn't have the records. So I'm left to look at another tragedy. My mother got up at about 11 p.m. that night, and she fell and broke basically every bone in her face. When I saw her the next morning, she was not recognizable. I would have not have been able to pick her out of a lineup. It was a tragedy. She lasted 25 days. Same pattern as my dad. All of this in 1 year, one facility, one room. That's why I say I am highly motivated to make sure that if there's anything that I personally can do, or on a bigger stage my company can do, one resident at a time, one facility at a time, there will come a point where, it's like Malcolm Gladwell says in his book, The Tipping Point, there'll come a point where the critical mass is reached, the consumer is informed, and we will have better health care. I deserve it. I'm going to be there in 10 or 12 or 15 years, name a number if I live long enough. I know my kids, They're not going to have me in their homes. They know me too well. I have long-term care insurance. We deserve better. And if I deserve better, other people deserve better.